Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's me again, and you are definitely in the right place because this is a exchange you're not going to want to miss of Charlie Kirk absolutely dismantling this unhinged professor, Cambridge professor. And today we've got an absolute must-see, a must-watch. Charlie Kirk going head-to-head with a Cambridge professor, completely dismantling their arguments over the U.S.'s role in the Ukraine war. This debate is fiery, thought-provoking, and most importantly, packed with moments that'll leave you speechless. Oh, and make sure you stick around because I want to share something with you that will literally knock your socks off when it comes to not just the money, not just the trillions of dollars, not just the weapons and all the resources that have been sent to Zelensky and Ukraine. A war that, let's be honest, if President Trump had been elected in 2020 would have never happened. You're going to be blown away by this unbelievably shocking Medicare update. So stay tuned. So that's enough of me yapping. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Watch.
Marvelous. Thank you. A very, very short question. Israel versus Hamas, good guy versus bad guy. Russia versus Ukraine. Who's the good guy and who's the bad guy?
Both are bad, one is worse.
Which way around?
Russia is worse than Ukraine.
Okay, so why haven't we pursued that?
What do you mean?
Well, it seems to me that in the whole of the current US proposition, that Ukraine is being the bad guy.
In what way? We funded Ukraine upwards to $200 billion.
Absolutely, but
We just signed a mineral deal with Ukraine, not Russia.
yeah, but you are expecting Ukraine to give up 20% of its territory to someone who...
So this is actually an interesting start to this debate, if you want to call it that. And, you know, we've had these discussions before about lesser of two evils. And I got to tell you guys right now, I don't know if I would necessarily compare Israel and Hamas to Russia and Ukraine, or Israel and Hamas to Ukraine and Russia, depending on how you visualize that. But at the end of the day, I also think, I don't know this for a fact, but I think the financial impact is far greater than $200 billion to Ukraine. Okay. Now, should Ukraine give up 20%? Let's see how this can, I don't want to interject too much. Let me just play the clip.
who invaded it.
Well, is Crimea part of Russia or Ukraine?
Ukraine.
That's where we don't agree.
Well, I'm afraid that's part of international treaty. That's not up for grabs.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, even Zelensky has said he's willing to give up Ukraine.
No. America signed the agreement that gave Ukraine Crimea.
Right.
When the Soviet Union ended.
Right. It was done. First of all, it never should have been done. It was largely ceremonial.
No.
But however, it was annexed under
It was
Obama.
done.
Yes, and it was a mistake, and it should be given back to Russia as a sign of good gesture to end this conflict.
Okay.
Who's currently controlling Crimea? Where was the Russian Navy headquartered in World War II? Where was the end of World War II? This is very important.
I'm not doubting that. I'm just saying that if we're being logical on what has happened, that you are now arguing against that flow. And I don't understand it. Because actually, why is Ukraine the bad guy?
No, I said they're bad. They're not the bad guy.
Yeah, well, you said they were both bad, but one was more bad.
Correct. Yes.
So here we have a Cambridge professor, obviously with a, auditorium, a stadium, a classroom full of students that are more than likely, if not for this professor, if not against Charlie Kirk, definitely going to be somewhat biased. Okay. Charlie Kirk makes excellent points. He has no one there to clap and applaud for him. Therefore, it makes it seem in such a way as if, the Cambridge professor is somehow winning this debate, which honestly, he hasn't really made any real points worth even arguing, because he provides broad questions and wildly unrelated comparisons that's debate, that he then switches to a completely different conversation. And so the question of, well, Charlie Kirk disagrees with Ukraine and Crimea. Well, he says, well, that's international treaty. Well, Charlie Kirk says, I disagree. And although Charlie Kirk's allowed to disagree, or he should be, you got to think, these are also the same types of people against Charlie Kirk who would say, well, the Gulf of Mexico is actually the Gulf of America. It's been signed. That's an international treaty, for instance. And they would say, well, I disagree. Well, why is it okay for you to disagree with that, but it's not okay for Charlie Kirk to disagree? It's not okay for Charlie Kirk to disagree with an annexed treaty by Obama, of all people. That's number one. Number two, I don't think Charlie Kirk ever said that Ukraine is the bad guy. He never said Ukraine is the bad guy. You said he said Ukraine is the bad guy. Charlie Kirk says one is worse than the other. Okay? It's a clever manipulation of the tongue, amplified by the applause and cheers of a biased crowd.
Yes.
So why is Ukraine bad?
Well, there's a lot wrong with Ukraine. First of all, they're not a democracy. Zelensky refuses to hold an election.
Well, no, he can't hold an election.
Oh, wait, did Churchill hold an election during the war?
Because under his constitution...
Hold on, Lincoln held an election during the war. That's not true. He can call an election. He can call a snap election. He's full dictator of the country.
No.
Because he knows that the people of Ukraine would kick him out immediately because he's deeply unpopular. In fact, if he wanted to show a statement to the world, he would call an election and win by 80% and say, see, I'm super popular. So that's number one. I have a problem with that. I have a problem with a person being propped up as a government we're sending $200 billion to that refuses even to face his voters.
Okay, I can't agree with you factually on that at all. Okay. I mean, constitutionally, Ukraine is not able to hold an election because it's under military law at the moment, and that's just a matter of fact.
Again, he can, as a prime minister or president, he can do whatever he wants.
He can't.
Okay, we're going to
can't
just go back
sign an
and
executive order.
Now, this is clever positioning here of the turn of events that has led to this situation, which ultimately is, in favor of this nonsense. Okay, again, a war that would have never started had Trump been president. Okay, that's number one. And the Cambridge professor is allowed to disagree and have his opinions, but yet again, Charlie Kirk is not. And, depending on what side of the internet you find yourself on, you may come across some of the folks that agree with this Cambridge professor. For instance, this one here says, Kirk isn't a thinker, he's a propagandist, that's all. Well, is there any proof or evidence to support this claim? Note Kirk's style of speech: extremely fast, staccato, high-pitched, extreme trauma response, perpetual intense fear, and knowingly lying nonstop, truly evil. This is projection. This isn't necessarily true. And the fact that you are commenting on his voice that he literally cannot change, he was born that way. I don't even want to go down that road. It's a ridiculous argument there. Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, and Tim Pool all talk like they got motors in their mouths. They think if they talk fast, they sound smart. They sound effing obnoxious. Well, one could argue that the Cambridge professor, you think if you talk with an accent, and you're British, you're automatically smarter than everybody. I don't know what accent that is, but you guys get the point. And then you get your paid audience there to clap for you like seals after everything you say. Charlie Kirk feels powerful debating teenagers at universities. This time he wasn't debating a kid and got owned hard. Well, if you find yourself at an away game and the referees aren't on your side, sure, it may seem like you got beat, but was it really fair to begin with? Was it really honest? Was it really, if you really want to think about it, even here in the United States, debates between President Trump and Joe Biden, debates between President Trump and Kamala Harris, debates between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz, and every legacy media outlet, leftist, Democrat, liberal, progressive, would say that the Democrats won every single debate. Explain to me how the Democrats won every single debate by proving no points besides the ones of their own that were all incorrect, debunked, misinformation, lies, let alone America decided unanimously that the Democrats did not belong in the White House. And so, it's interesting how people's perspective, their perspective on these things, but that's just how I look at it. Just because you speak fast doesn't mean you're intelligent. Just because you speak slow doesn't mean you're intelligent. I'm just saying. Charlie Kirk's argument about, I think this intelligence, going back to this one, the intelligence here, it's not so much what is said, okay? It's what's heard. And oftentimes these types of people hear certain types of things, and their intelligence or lack thereof is really the biggest problem. No matter how intelligent any potential president, candidate, or in this case, dictator or prime minister for Ukraine's perspective is, if the masses are dumb enough to listen to and believe everything that's going to ultimately put them in a worse off situation than they already are, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how intelligent the leader is. It doesn't. It matters how stupid the followers are. Charlie Kirk's argument about Zelensky is also an argument about Trump. Apparently, he feels that the president of the United States can override the Constitution, and he doesn't understand what a constitutional government entails. In other words, Charlie Kirk is an idiot. Well, I hate to break it to Sean Pat, but Sean Pat is an idiot because the Constitution, Ukraine's Constitution, and the laws in which Ukraine operate are not the same as the United States, the U.S. Constitution, folks. Okay, there's that. There may be similarities, but they are not the same. Charlie Kirk's argument about Zelensky is also an argument about Trump. That is entirely incorrect. That is entirely incorrect. And I'd love to see any supporting evidence of this. President Trump is not a dictator. President Trump is not a prime minister. President Trump, last I checked, isn't the president of Ukraine. Like, come on, guys. But this is the echo chamber. This is the echo chamber of the left. And, this one, and then we're going to get into popularity of Zelensky. And, Zelensky's approval is 67%. Has Trump ever had that? Well, with an approval rating of 67%, Zelensky is far more relevant than Trump will ever be. Charlie Kirk is completely out of touch. Well, yeah. Look, I can tell you guys right now. Zelensky having an approval rating. Zelensky is unpopular, asks this question. That guy could get elected in like 95% of countries worldwide. The only countries where he wouldn't get elected are dictatorships like North Korea or China. Needless to say, in terms of popularity, Zelensky as a leader is about 500 times more popular than Trump could ever be. And I highly disagree with that. Granted, this is an argument that could never be proven for so many reasons. However, I could find a way to get Trump to have a 67% approval rating. I could find a way to get Trump to have a 95% approval rating. I could find a way to have Trump get a 100% approval rating. I could even find a way to get Trump to get a 0% approval rating, depending on the sample size and the source that I select to engage in my questioning. You see how that works?
Okay. Constitutionally, Ukraine is not able to hold an election because it's under military law at the moment, and that's just a matter of fact.
Again, he can, as a prime minister or president, he can do whatever he wants.
He can't.
Okay.
He
We're going to
can't
just go back
sign
and
an
forth
executive order and change their constitution. President either, so
okay.
Hopefully there's no.
He could even do a ceremonial election to see where he actually stands with the people.
I think we call those opinion polls.
Yes, and they're very negative.
Firmly ahead in the opinion
Again, but you would agree that a person that holds on to power without the election of the sovereign is pretty questionable.
No, not in those circumstances.
Okay, then we disagree.
No, okay, that's fine. That's fine. But give me another reason why you.
They are the most corrupt country in Europe that never even met the most remote standards of joining NATO. Do you not know where a lot of this money is going?
I don't disagree that there is a problem with corruption, but the most corrupt country in Europe. Are you sure about that?
I'd have to double or triple think about that, but they're very corrupt.
Okay,
I mean,
so that's a little bit doubtful. It's not absolute.
I mean, well,
there's plenty of corruption around. I mean, let's face it, we are talking about comparison with some of the states you're doing business with in the Gulf.
Oh, of course, but we're not giving them money, they're giving us money. That's the difference, right? Saudi Arabia.
Oh, so it's fine.
Well, hold on a second.
It's morally acceptable to take money from corrupt people.
Well, hold on. First of all, as far as morally acceptable, you do what's best in the benefit of your country. And so, for example.
Yeah, so this Cambridge professor is just only here to attempt to introduce one-liners and mic drop moments that more than likely there's a sign somewhere that says, all right, everybody clap and applaud. It's Charlie Kirk's turn to talk, clap and applaud so no one can hear him. And there really needs to be a moderator here. I don't know why Charlie Kirk's wasting his time with this, but more importantly, there's no metric, there's no standard of measurement to determine which country is the most corrupt. So debating and arguing over the most corrupt in Europe is like, I feel like these two should be above this, but be that as it may, let's talk about money, okay? As they brought that up. Now, granted, this is an ironic situation here, especially from the perspective of how and why and when this war started that created this opportunity for Zelensky not to have an election to be voted out, for which if that were possible and the men that were sent to war who could still possibly vote and weren't actually killed in this process could vote, they would probably vote against him. But we'll never know. We'll never know now, will we? Now, what some people may not know and may not be aware of is how Ukrainian refugees arriving in the U.S. have access to vital health care through programs like Medicaid or refugee medical assistance, which help cover their medical needs as they resettle. Now, Medicaid is definitely a huge talking point right now with Trump's big, beautiful bill on the way to the Senate. However, this shows how the government steps in to support vulnerable groups, for instance, Ukrainian refugees, not so much South African refugees, but be that as it may, similarly for Americans aged 65 and older, Medicare plays a critical role in ensuring healthcare access. Within Medicare, options like our partner Chapter, offering free Medicare advice and free Medicare help, offer assistance in helping folks select and choose tailored coverage to meet their own personal needs. And I've received comments from folks like you saying, I've called Chapter and they saved me $500. I've called Chapter, they saved me $1,000. I've called Chapter, they saved me $1,400. Well, based on these trends, I can only imagine what the next comment will read after you call Chapter. Would you like to dive into how Chapter Medicare works for and to help seniors save money? I'm sure you would, right? Their number's on the screen. And I'll put some comments up on the screen for you guys as well. You can call Chapter anytime, 270-467-2426. And normally I would say, tell them Kevin sent you. But this first comment here says, Kevin, Tracy O'Connor was a great help at Chapter. Well, thank you for leaving this comment, Kenneth. And I guess call Chapter and ask for Tracy. Ask for Tracy O'Connor. This is some amazing feedback here that I think everyone should hear. I think everyone should be aware of. I don't think this should be a one-sided debate. For instance, like what we're about to get back to in Cambridge with Charlie Kirk and this woke professor here. But thank you, Kevin. I saved $2 signs with Chapter. Thank you, Stephanie Brown, for leaving that comment. Thank Kevin and Michelle. Michelle's my wife, if you guys don't know, for informing the public about Chapter Medicare help, as some of the elderly folks don't trust the Medicare insurance industry. But those are just some of the comments. I've got so many more, but I'm not going to distract too much from what we have left to discuss here. Give Chapter a call. Get your free Medicare help. Get your free Medicare advice. Find out if you can save money. 270-467-2426. Askchapter.org/Kevin, Kevin, or just dial 270-467-2426.
Example, we were allied with Russia during the Second World War, and I'm glad we were. And I would ask you,
Don't forget,
how much money is too much money to send to Ukraine? We're at $200 billion right now.
I don't think you have to send any more money to Ukraine.
We agree.
I think you have to agree to support them as a free country and perhaps sell them weapons, like you're very happy to sell weapons to less free countries. And I think Europe will pick up the slack, as we ought to. And I don't disagree with some of the comments about Europe not looking after its own security. Yet, this approach, which was supposedly to end the war quickly, which now seems to be elongating it, and in doing so, it's throwing up a smokescreen of very variable facts, if they are facts at all, about how things occurred, which actually isn't helping things. And if people can't see that Putin is stalling,
I agree with you. I think he might be stalling.
And therefore, and I think even your president has acknowledged the fact that he thinks he might be stalling.
That's correct. So we don't have a disagreement there.
No, we don't. No,
we just have a disagreement about the efficacy of tactics. I'm willing to say we could be wrong.
And that is the moment in which Charlie Kirk proves he is the better man. He is far more intelligent. He is capable of at least stating and admitting he's willing to say we could be wrong. Whereas this Cambridge professor will absolutely never, ever allow himself to utter those very words because he's so proud of himself. He's so proud of his ability to get this crowd of his own peers to clap and applaud for him, knowing good and well that he says, if you show up and you support me, you'll get an A in my class, in my or whatever course. I don't know how you describe these in university, but Charlie Kirk, to me, in my opinion, absolutely defeats these MAGA haters, on U.S. soil and abroad. And absolutely see at this very moment, this Cambridge professor dies inside as Charlie Kirk is clearly the bigger man here and smarter, more intelligent. And as we conclude here, you guys will see that the Cambridge professor's argument just continues to get weaker and weaker and weaker. Because if you really want to get down to the nuts and bolts of ending this war in Ukraine, I can assure you that the Democrats and Biden's auto pin strategy was absolutely not it. It was solely a money laundering operation to continuously propel this conflict to be prolonged indefinitely. Okay. The biggest problem with this, besides everyone else having opinions and putting their 2 cents in that literally have no seat at the table, is Zelensky and Putin too, Putin as well. But the wishy-washy back and forth flip-flopping of Zelensky is it's telling, especially to see the levels of which his greed have climbed to and his corruption has gotten so out of hand. And then from the perspective of making any comparisons to the Middle East, well, I hate to break it to this Cambridge professor, but President Trump's got great relationships in the Middle East, and I highly doubt that there's going to be any wars and conflicts there, but maybe more specifically Hamas and Gaza and Israel and Palestine. But that's another topic of discussion for another video.
No, well,
of course you could be wrong in life.
We could all be wrong. But actually bringing that war to an end consistently actually isn't going very well. And I would just suggest to you that whatever tactics have been used are perhaps not the best. And they are certainly inconsistent with what's going on in the Middle East and how America has been treating parties in the Middle East. But I've had enough of your time.
No, that's a fair contention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.